torturing people. And that is how John Sage would become the person who was then in charge of torturing and murdering countless men, women, and children at Chillingham Castle.
Because why not kill the children?
So, as the war with the Scots was coming to an end, John Sage had decided that he wanted to rid himself of the Scottish prisoners that were being held in the castle.
Well, I mean, yeah, get rid of them.
Rather than freeing them, he rounded up the men, women, and the older children and took them to the courtyard, where he then proceeded to toss each of them onto a massive fire and burn them alive.
Why not?
This is like the one part of the story where I cringe a little bit, because even though it is so long ago, the awful things that happened here are so awful that when I go through and I reread things, it still kind of hurts my heartstrings right now.
Which, I mean, why wouldn't it?
It's going to get real nasty. So the younger children who were not taken to the fire were taken from their parents beforehand, and they were brought upstairs to the Edward room, where they could not only see their parents and loved ones being burned alive, but also hear their screams of agony and smell their burning flesh. John, who was an incredibly paranoid man, go figure, believed that if he released the children from the dungeon, they would only return when they were older to seek revenge upon him and the rest of England.
Which I get that kind of paranoia in that time period, but for real though.
I mean, when I say children, we're talking real small children.
Yeah.
It was then that John decided to bring a small axe to the Edward room.
Just a tiny one.
It was just a tiny axe.
I know.
It was a small hatchet, where he then proceeded to hack all of the children, some of them being as young as just 1 year old, to pieces.
That's the kind of blood I want on my hands. Small babies.
Exactly. I was thinking about being a small child in that room and waiting in line to be hacked to death by an axe while you watched everybody else go through the same gruesome death. That same axe can be seen today on display in the stairwell.
Oh, no.
The Edward room is one of the most active rooms in the castle. People often say that they can see the chandelier in the room swinging without it being moved or touched by anybody, or when they're by themselves. The Edward room is also reported to consistently have a foul smell that comes and goes, and a very strange atmosphere.
Well, of course.
John Sage also had a girlfriend, Elizabeth Charlton. The two of them were apparently pretty into rough and violent sexual practices, which not a huge deal.
Right.
You know, we're all about not yucking on the yum.
Right.
And that's fine.
Yeah, get yours where you get it.
Get it. One night, the two of them were apparently getting all kinds of bajiggity up in the torture chamber. Bajiggity.
Uh-huh.
And they were having sex on a torture rack when John started to autoerotically asphyxiate Elizabeth. John Sage was really great at killing people, but was apparently not great at keeping people alive.
Right, clearly.
So, because of that, he accidentally killed Elizabeth.
I kind of feel like maybe it would have been on purpose.
I actually do think it was an accident. I don't think he meant to kill her. It wouldn't have been wise for John to purposefully make a move like that. Elizabeth's father was a prominent leader of the Border Reivers, which were a tribal band that lived mostly in a no-man's land between England and Scotland. It doesn't come as a huge shock that Papa Bear and the rest of his badass Border Reivers would be completely incensed by Elizabeth's death and also want John Sage dead. They were a super powerful organization, and they commanded a vast, highly skilled and experienced fighting force. So it is recorded that the Reivers had actually met with King Edward, and they basically told him that if he did not have John Sage executed by his order, that they would lend their total badassery to the Scots and help them invade England, and then the Scots would probably win. Because King Edward I was virtually penniless due to the war with the Scots, he was kind of forced to call upon John Sage to be hung. They called upon him to be hanged. John Sage was captured and hanged in front of an enormous crowd on the grounds at Chillingham Castle.
Good.
As he was hanging and dying a very slow death from strangling on his noose.
I now remember that they made sure it suffocated, not broke.
It was the coup de grace. It was the worst death. And here's the thing, though, is that he had such a reputation for being such an asshole that all of these people showed up to his hanging to literally cheer and celebrate his death.
Yeah.
But it gets worse than that. So while he died a very slow and painful death and was strangling upon his noose, the crowd started to take souvenirs from him. And they began to cut off John's toes, his fingers, his testicles, both of them.
Right.
And his nose, whilst he was still alive. And to this day, it is not known how long John Sage actually hung there being mutilated before he actually died. And it's also not known whether he died from asphyxiation or bleeding out.
I mean, even if you're a butt face, I would not really be into that.
Yeah, it's not a great way to go. So the ghost of John Sage has been seen wandering the castle by many visitors and staff. Others claim to have heard his footsteps behind them when walking the castle grounds, and these footsteps are often followed by the sound of somebody dragging something behind them.
I was going to ask how they would know it was him.
I don't know. I've heard that people see his apparition. I read that people see his apparition in the courtyard. So I think that people assume the footsteps and the dragging are him because they imagine that he's dragging a body. Mm-hmm. And then also because they see his apparition out there, they assume that when they hear the footsteps, it's him as well. Without being able to see something, it's hard to say.
Right, but then there are
exactly
people that are more intuitive, essentially, that could possibly feel as though it seems to have his presence.
I think energies are like fingerprints, and they're unique. There's also the Minstrel's Gallery, which is a balcony that overlooks what is now used as the tea room at Chillingham Castle. And people report having been pushed down the stairs here. And while on this balcony, some other people often suffer from terrible headaches or an awful feeling of nausea. Mm-hmm. A few people have even claimed that they've experienced an almost irresistible urge to fling themselves over the balcony and onto the concrete floor below.
Ah.
At Chillingham Castle. We have the Blue Boy, also known sometimes as the Radiant Boy. He's one of the most famous presences associated with Chillingham Castle. So the story goes that when the boy was alive, he had found some top secret documents that were to be given to the Spaniards from the aristocrat who had owned the castle at the time. These documents were meant to be given to them in an effort to help them defeat the English during the days of the Spanish Armada. The boy, after being discovered that he had found the documents, was walled up alive with said documents, and his body was found in the 1920s.
Because also, why wouldn't you just take a small child and put them in your walls?
Well, Chillingham Castle. We have a rich history of not being great children.
Also, I like the fact that we're back to back on you putting people inside of your walls.
Yeah, we are. He was discovered in the 1920s inside of said wall, along with remnants of his blue clothing.
Right.
Hence the name,
the Blue Boy.
The Blue Boy.
Sad.
It is. Oh, no. No, it's really...
I mean, I'm just saying, like, blue obviously is also a colloquial term for sad.
It's really sad. It would be hard without there being evidence and proof to speculate that he was walled up alive, correct?
Right.
There was proof, though.
Right.
And this is why we know that. Upon examination of the body, it was discovered that the bones in his fingers were almost completely worn away from where they had been trying to scratch his way out of the wall.
Because survival instinct.
Exactly. And then also the scratch marks on the inside of the wall weren't exactly fantastic. It's been reported that Around midnight, sometimes you can hear his cries of agony and fear emanating from the walls inside of the pink room in the house, which is where he was walled up. So the blue boy was walled up in the pink room. But every single time people hear these cries around that time, they always come from the walls inside of the pink room, and that's how they know it's him. He is the most famous ghost to roam the castle, and he also seems to be the friendliest towards public. Which is sad and sweet at the same time. But I think that that's also maybe why he's one of the more popular
because he's a
ghosts.
sweetie.
Because he's a sweet baby. He's a sweet baby. Yeah. If you go outside and you look at the lake, you would never know that beneath the surface of the lake lie the remains of thousands of Scots killed during the war with the English.
I mean, yeah, whatever, I guess.
Yeah, it's just whatever, right? The bodies would be bundled onto a cart and then thrown into the lake back in the day. And because of how many people were disposed of inside of the lake, the water within it is rumored to be cursed, and many people either choose to never touch it or go near it altogether, or will simply not visit it at all.
See, I would visit, but I definitely wouldn't touch the water.
Yeah, I'm not about that life. During the restoration work in the 19th century, workmen uncovered 2 grinning skeletons, the bones of a man and a child, and they were close to a trapdoor that opens to the stone arches of the underground vaults. It is possible that they hid during an attack laid on the castle by the border reavers, only to be trapped in their safe hiding place by accident. Workmen also discovered in the lower dungeons of the castle the perfectly preserved figure of a man sitting in a chair. Unfortunately, as soon as they had opened the room and the air had rushed in, the body had crumbled to ashes.
Right, because obviously sealed rooms are what helps preserve.
That is Chillingham Castle, and I would love to go there. You can spend the night there. You could do really cool paranormal investigations there. I'm about that life. That was my story. Can I do something really quick?
Yeah.
I used to work with Angie at the bakery. I'm a huge fan of hers because she, on top of being an amazing chef, has a fantastic website called The Savory Confection.
Okay.
Not only amazing food, but also food photography.
Okay.
Which, you know, is right up my alley.
Right.
Do you have a cheers for us?
I do. Pain makes you stronger. Tears make you braver. Heartbreak makes you wiser. And vodka makes you not remember any of that crap. It's true for you today. So cheers.
Cheers to love you.
I love you back.
If you are listening to the show and you're not already engaging with us or following us on social media, feel free to cheers with us on Instagram, where we are Shots in the Dark Podcast. We also have a Facebook page and group, and that's also Shots in the Dark Podcast.
We also are on Twitter at Shots in the Dark P, as well as our Snapchat, which is also Shots in the Dark P. And if you'd like to email us, you can email us at shotsinthedarkpodcast@gmail.com.
We love hearing from people. It's sweet.
And if you could review us on both Apple Podcasts and also Google Play.
It helps us so much because if you like the show, it helps other people who might also be interested in the show
to
find us.
Yeah.
From both of us here at Shots in the Dark Podcast, we hope we've left you shaken.
Not stirred.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.